Hello and welcome to our podcast, Lessons Learned to Advance Your Career. This is a new segment of our global podcast named 10 Lessons Learned. In this new program, we dive into the wisdom of professionals who have navigated the highs, the lows, and the turning points in their careers. My name is Siebe Vanderzee and I'm your host. I'm a corporate executive recruiter with more than 25 years of experience, helping companies find the best possible talent and coaching people to land their next, hopefully perfect job. Lessons Learned to Advance Your Career is based on hard-earned insights. We offer practical, no-nonsense advice to help you make smart moves in your professional journey, whether you are just starting out, looking for a promotion, or aiming for the next big opportunity. We cover it all, the good, the bad, the ugly. And as we all know, success in your career doesn't typically happen by accident. It happens lesson by lesson. Our guest today is Urban Adams. Urban Adams is a seasoned financial advisor and a published author with over 25 years of industry experience. Starting out at Charles Schwab, he currently runs his independent wealth management practice in Phoenix, Arizona. Known for his personalized approach, Urban combines stoic philosophy with practical financial guidance to help his clients nationwide achieve their goals. As a father of 3 daughters and longtime coach of female athletes, Urban also brings unique insights into women's financial challenges. His commitment to customized financial planning has made him a trusted advisor to his clients. You can learn a lot more about Urban Adams on our website, 10lessonslearned.com. Hello, Urban. Thank you for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing well, Siebe. Great to be here and great to speak with you and your audience today.
I look forward to our conversations and, of course, the lessons that you have sent me. We're going to talk about that. But I'm also curious, you're talking about combining stoic philosophy with practical financial guidance. What does that mean to you? Stoic philosophy.
Well, Stoic philosophy I got introduced to a number of years ago. And if I can boil it down into a rather simple explanation for today's conversation, is that it's the focusing on what we know we can control and try not to be bothered by the things we cannot. And as you might expect in the world of financial planning and investing strategies, there's a tremendous amount of ambiguity and a tremendous number of things that we cannot control. So my approach from a financial planning perspective is one to embrace that ambiguity while also making sure that we've got it dialed in as far as what it is we can control.
That's not always easy. You make it sound as if it's easy. Is that part of your personality or is that something you had to learn?
It's definitely something I had to learn. I had to refine. I continue to refine, but something that has resonated very well with the clients that I work with.
Interesting. Also, I'm curious, your new book, I like the title, Wealth Your Way. Wealth Your Way. It's about creating the life you want while ensuring your financial security. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that book had been something of an idea for a number of years for me, and I was really, really looking forward to finding a way to do that over the last year or so. I finally undertook that project, put together what I believe is a primer that will, at a high level, address the various concepts of financial planning. It's not just investment management, we might talk about in one of our lessons later on. It's about emotional decision making, because we're emotional people, and we make sometimes decisions that are not in our best interest based on emotions rather than rationality. And my philosophy, along with making sure that we cover the various pillars of financial planning, but to also address how we respond emotionally to the events that inevitably occur throughout our lives.
It goes back to being stoic, correct?
It does. And it doesn't mean not emotional. It just
Right.
means being in control of one's emotions.
Yeah. Well, that's obviously not easy for many people, but we'll be talking about that. I'm also curious, before we get to your lessons, your unique insights into financial challenges women have to deal with. What can you explain what you mean with that?
Sure. As you mentioned in my introduction, I'm a father of three daughters. I've coached female athletes because my daughters played sports throughout their, early and into early adult years. And throughout my practice, one of the things that I've done to grow my practice over the years is I've acquired the practice of other advisors who've retired, both of whom happen to be female advisors. So I ended up with uh, albeit a slight majority of either women, single women, widowed, divorced, or head of household. And over time, being a dad for 25 plus years, working with female athletes, working with a slight majority of female clients, my communication style has clearly changed over the years. And
Can you explain how you changed that? How you adjusted that?
it it actually lends itself to a Stoic quote. If you don't mind, I won't
Please.
use too many, but there's a reason why we have two ears and one mouth, so that we can listen more than we speak. And I think to some degree, some of the core things were there. My kids would joke with me from time to time. I'd encounter a stranger, out and about sometimes, and they'd say, "You can talk to anybody." And the secret isn't in being able to talk to anyone. The secret is in being able to listen to anyone and learn their stories. It, just recently, I was out on a walk. I walk daily, walking in the morning by myself, AirPods in, and I encounter a neighbor I'd seen just passing by every once in a while. The gentleman kind of waved me down, so we stopped for a conversation. Probably talked for 10 or 15 minutes. I did a lot of listening. At the end of the conversation, verbatim, his response was, "Thank you for listening to me."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a skill, and obviously it's appreciated, even if people don't say it openly. But I think, yeah, it's in general respected when people are there to listen before suggesting, making ideas, etc. I want to throw out another question because I can. No, I'm kidding. Is there a lesson that you have learned in your life, in your career, that you wish you would have learned when you were perhaps 25 years old?
Well, I think that leads us into our very first lesson, and that is when it comes to financial planning, investing. I think the way I characterized it with you is that time is your best friend until it isn't. And many of us uh, treat a lot of things in that manner as if we're going to be around for a long time
Yeah.
and or indefinitely. And what's interesting is I think about this as I did this a very small project early on in college. I did that argument between investing early for a limited period of time or waiting a certain period of time to invest and at the same rate. And the fact of the matter is, compounding and time are your best friends when it comes to a successful investment strategy. Granted, you have to have a good investment strategy in mind. You have to execute on it. But the more years that money has to grow for you will be much more impactful than being able to put away a great deal of money later on in life. And both are important, of course, because I would argue that you save that money throughout your lifetime, but the money that you put away earlier, we don't really think about it in that respect. And I admittedly would wish I would have learned that too and saved more then. But we all have to learn that lesson at some point, hopefully earlier than later.
Yeah. So indeed, lesson number one is time is your best friend until it's not. Yeah, but how do we know what's going to happen? Can I say tomorrow or next month or next year or in the next 10 years? We know from reality that things change. It's hard to predict. So how do you advise people when it comes to their future?
That's a great point because part of my philosophy around working with my clients is making sure that we're creating a certain level of security as much as we can looking into the future. But at the same time, making sure that we're not simply giving up the enjoyment of debt in the present, in other words. And it is a very delicate balance. I share in my book a story about a couple who went on a rather extravagant trip to Europe a few years ago, and they had a wonderful time, couple weeks, a riverboat cruise, and they were concerned about making sure that that didn't impact their long-term financial plan. Well, they had a wonderful time on the trip. We spent an entire lunch meeting talking about nothing about it other than that, photos, you name it. Less than 6 months later, one of the members of that couple passed away unexpectedly after an extended illness. And it was totally, out of the blue. And I look back on it and I reflect, and granted, losing a client that I felt dearly about to begin with. But secondly, for them to lose a spouse, I think about the fact that what if they hadn't taken that trip? What if they hadn't had that conversation, worked through that process to make sure that they could go on that trip? So it's definitely not a lesson lost on me that we enjoy the present. That doesn't make me simply a yes man for my clients about spending money, but I'm more inclined to encourage them to do the things that are on that bucket list, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very sad story that you're sharing here. But in general, if I think about my early years, and perhaps you had the same, and most people have that, you're in your 20s, you have aspirations, looking for the right job, maybe relocate, perhaps starting a family, children. Wow. And at the same time, looking back sometimes is easier. I wish I would have started a plan much earlier, even though it was not clear where I was going and how things were going to develop. Is that also part of what you're suggesting, that people start early on considering their wealth management, if it's wealth, their financial management situation?
I do. And I think about that because pardon me, I work with not only clients that are maybe around my age or around that, but I'm now working with their adult children who are starting out, they're graduating from college, they're starting their careers.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the conversations are different, the planning needs are different, but we're building that foundation for them to be in a good position financially for later in life. And even if that's just a little bit, that's better than not doing any at all or waiting until they're in their 30s or 40s or beyond, for that matter.
Yeah.
And setting that foundation, setting those behaviors in place will only enable them to better ensure their long-term success.
Good point. Lesson number 2, the 3-bucket strategy. I'm curious what that is.
I look at finances, and this is actually a great segue from the last question, actually, because I look at it from the standpoint of clients. We all have that common goal of retirement. So we're conditioned to save for retirement, 401k, your Roth IRAs, your IRAs, whatever manner of retirement savings there are. And granted, that's great. But when you're 25 and you can't access those savings until you're 59 and a half without a penalty, where does that leave you? Well, that could leave you in a pretty difficult spot in the event of unexpected expenses or goals prior to retirement, for instance. So what I encourage clients to do is make sure that not only do they have that retirement savings going, but they've got an emergency fund, whatever you want to call it. It's in cash, it's in the bank account. Maybe it's not earning a great deal of interest, but it is first in line for any financial calamity. You have some unexpected expense. Now, after we have those two in place, one thing that I've learned over time is that not all of my clients really felt comfortable or knew that could also save and invest outside of retirement accounts. So that third bucket is that what we'd call taxable or non-qualified in my industry. Those dollars can also be saved outside of retirement. They're available for investment, which gives them a greater opportunity to grow than the emergency fund. But when that happens, then we're further insulating the retirement funds from being tapped into, which can sometimes be a problem for younger people changing jobs, a loss of a job,
Yeah.
and they dip into the retirement savings versus perhaps other buckets they may have created. So my 3-bucket strategy is designed to insulate the retirement savings and create flexibility prior to retirement age.
Yeah. And perhaps somewhat connected, investing in real estate, buying a home. Is that something that you recommend? Of course, we're dealing in a marketplace in the United States. Homes have become very expensive. Interest rates are still very high. But do you think, as an overall plan for people who are early in their career, does it make sense or doesn't matter? What are your thoughts on that?
If it does, and granted, it boils down to every individual situation,
Exactly.
their long-term plans. I'd say that for the most part, and there are some younger clients that I've discussed this, with rather recently, is that make sure that you're in a financial position to do so and taking the steps to put oneself in that good spot. But in addition to it, it is somewhat of a long or longer term, unless they plan on keeping it for a while, turning it around and having it be a rental for the next step, or if it's a trade up type of situation, I give them a certain time frame that says, and this is not hard and fast or anything like that, but if you're going to buy it, live in it, I'd probably aim for 7 to 10 years,
Yeah.
unless, something changes dramatically for you. If it's a quick turnaround or if it's trying to make a quick dollar, it's probably not going to be an adequate strategy overall.
That's a very good thought. I agree with you. I think overall in, let's say, the Western world, I don't know the whole world when it comes to real estate, but in the Western world, over time, we have seen real estate values going up. And yeah, there were
Yeah.
some dips and financial crisis situations. But over time, if I look back, yes, I'm glad I was able to purchase a home and move up, etc. But it's obviously something to consider in your strategy for the future. It leads also to lesson number 3. Have a plan, not just an investment strategy, a real plan.
Yes. And that plan not only includes your investment strategy, but that includes tax planning. That includes estate planning. That includes planning for the unexpected risks. So through life insurance or later in life, long-term care insurance. It includes a variety of things that, yes, your investment strategy is very important to your long-term success, but it's certainly not the only thing. And the way I describe that is you could say, hey, I'm going to leave Phoenix and I'm going to New York. And I've used this comparison before. A fellow advisor mentioned this one time. But if you don't tell me how soon you want to get there, how you're going to get there, are you going to walk? Are you going to drive? Are you going to fly? What are the stops along the way? An investment strategy without a comprehensive plan is a little like that. As the Stoic quote goes, is if there's no destination in mind, no wind is favorable for that ship, so to speak. So the investment strategy is important. Think of it as, the engine in a car or one of the very important rooms of the house. But if you don't have the other components, it's like building a house without a roof. And you also won't have a clear idea where you stand along the way as
Right.
far as your success or progress with your goals.
It makes sense, I think, to a lot of people. At the same time, I can think of, again, people early in their career. It's like they don't have the space to invest or to make a plan because they got to pay the bills, take care of their family,
Yes.
and hopefully they can get that taken care of and go to the next month and the next month. And sure, they would like to buy a home or do other things, but what kind of advice would you have for people who are in that situation where they're not ready yet, perhaps, to invest, but are there things they can learn? Are there things they can work on to create savings, even if they have a very, let's say, modest income?
There are, and I would say that it would start out modestly with that plan. And if I were to encourage any strategy, especially for those who are younger and earlier in their careers, create the emergency fund first and and reach a certain level where that feels comfortable. And once you reach that, then start talking about some of the other savings, whether that be retirement, if they're participating in a 401k or a 401k is available through their employer,
Yeah.
at least contribute enough so that you're maximizing any matching contributions that your employer will make. Because you you're going to add to the money that you're willing to put away in that respect. And that's leaving money on the table long term.
I think that's very good advice. An emergency fund for people who are not in a situation where they have lots of money to invest.
Right.
At the same time, using a different category, people who are in their mid-career, life is good, they own a home, and perhaps they're considering buying a second home or invest in, could be real estate, it could be something else. What kind of advice would you give people like that? Because I guess owning a second home, it creates obviously commitments. You cannot just buy it and leave it alone. You have to take care of it.
Exactly. So for those who are in that portion of their career, my hope would be at that point that they've already got the emergency fund and settled on what that comfortable amount is for them. They're regularly saving for retirement. They might also be saving for college. There's
Yeah.
a 529 plan. And they could be adding to investments that have the opportunity to grow that could be used for that down payment on that second home or something to that effect. But I'd be cautious about making sure that those first two buckets are in place before adding that third. And that would be my advice to those in that phase in their career.
That's why the 3-bucket strategy.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we're talking today with Urban Adams, a seasoned financial advisor and a published author with over 25 years of financial industry experience, sharing his lessons learned to advance your career. Before we move on, here's a quick message to our listeners. We really appreciate your support. Whether it is sharing our podcast with a friend, leaving a review, or checking out our affiliate partner, Audible, every bit helps us bring you the lessons that matter most. Speaking of Audible, they are a great platform to enjoy both lessons learned to advance your career and, of course, 10 lessons learned, in addition to thousands of audiobooks and other inspiring podcasts. You can try Audible for free for 30 days at audibletrial.com/10 lessons learned. 10. So audibletrial.com/10 lessons learned. All right, moving on. Lesson number 4. Expect your plan not to go according to plan. Shouldn't laugh about it because it's serious, but what are your thoughts on that?
Back to my earlier comments about embracing ambiguity. The way that I explain this to clients from time to time is that we're going to plan. Now, granted, the farther away we are, so the younger we are, the earlier we are in our plan, the less things have to be in focus.
Mm-hmm.
We're creating financial, foundational lessons. Over time, your life will have its ups and downs. It's not a linear path. And the idea is to create something along the way that can absorb those difficult times, because we know whether it's the loss of a job, whether it's the loss of a loved one, whether it's the economics and financial challenges, they're all going to happen. We don't know when, but what we do is having a plan in place allows us to respond to those unexpected events in a better manner. If one has no plan and that unexpected event occurs, what are we doing? We're going to make an emotional decision in that moment about what to do next. And that may or may not be the right decision to make. However, if we have a plan in place and this unexpected event still happens, we now have the context of the overall plan to respond. And I think of a financial plan in a way sometimes as guardrails along the path of our lives, so that we don't go careening off the side, so to speak.
Tough part is, I think, still for people who may not have a steady income, or their income is not strong enough to really plan ahead because, like as I said earlier, they're lucky to pay the bills and move on. Is there a thought, a suggestion that you have in that case for people to say, hey, help me out. I'm not in a position to make a plan. Maybe they are.
Well, I'd argue that there's the ability to make a plan regardless, even if it doesn't involve accumulating savings. I think there's whether it's educational or career aspirational goals, they're always there. I haven't mentioned
Yeah.
it, but in my background, I didn't start my practice of working with clients until I was in my early 40s. And I'm going strong. I'm happier than ever that I made that decision. And it was a never too late to start type of situation. I would have loved to have
That's
started earlier. But the idea is have the goals to work to attain. And they don't always have to be financial, but work to improve oneself at all times.
Yeah, good point. And now my brain is thinking about people more advanced in their career, and perhaps people are looking towards retirement. Could be 5 or 10 years away from them. It's difficult, right? Because the plan may be clear and say, okay, I'm going to work until this year, and then I'm going to retire. But something can happen that disturbs that plan,
Yes.
and especially when you're looking at your retirement options, you may miss out on some of those options.
I think of, and one of the things that came up as you were mentioning that question was, I think about some individuals that I know who, while I wasn't working as an advisor at the time, retired right as the financial crisis was occurring in 2008, 2009. A lesson that they learned at that time was the fact that, and you mentioned this, 5, 10 years prior to retirement, here they were on the cusp of retirement and had not changed their investment strategy
Yeah,
in the years, and I say years specifically, 5 years or less.
yeah,
You're adjusting that strategy along the way because we don't know when that market downturn is going to occur.
exactly.
And it significantly changed the outlook as far as what they felt like they could spend in retirement versus even a year prior. And that's why it's so important. It's not, hey, I'm going to retire this year. I better figure out how much I'm going to be able to afford to live on for the remainder of my life. It's, I should be thinking about that 5, 10, 15 or more years ahead, because the closer you get to that target, the more in focus it gets, the more comprehensive and the more dialed in your plan is. It still is not going to go exactly as we planned it. However, you're better able to respond to those unexpected events with that plan in place, especially things like market challenges as you're approaching retirement.
Yeah, good point. Very good, important point for all of us, I guess, to be aware and to apply that lesson. Emergency fund, as you mentioned earlier, I think is also like, okay, we're stuck. What's going to happen? Well, at least we have some security in that emergency fund. Good point. Lesson number 5: understand your relationship with money. Please, what are your thoughts on that one before I start thinking about that?
Well, without diving right into it, I guess you might, if you were, for our listeners listening to my previous responses, there's a fair amount of addressing the emotional aspects of it. And it's important to understand ourselves and how we think about money, what our background is like, and what caused us to have the attitude or attitudes that we do about money. I met with some clients over lunch a month or two ago, and mother and daughter who are separate clients. One's retired, one's still working, and they grew up in a single parent household, very modest means, and were telling me about how, sometimes it was very difficult. It was down to, a couple of dollars on any given day of what they had available to them. And from my perspective, hearing those kinds of stories and understanding it helps me understand the types of decisions we're making from a long-term planning perspective and making sure that security is at the utmost for them,
Yeah.
and understanding what the trade-offs are for that security. But understanding that, because I could make the greatest argument in the world that, hey, this is the allocation we have because this is the potential expected return long term, and get buried in data,
Yeah.
and it not resonate one bit because of that earlier insecurity.
Yeah. And of course, we're talking about lots of people in different situations. There's not one solution that fits all.
Exactly.
If you think about someone's career, what are key elements? Well, for example, location. Where do you want to live? Where do you want to work? The stability. Some people, they have multiple jobs, or someone is happy to work for the same organization. I don't want to say their whole life, but for many, many years. Ambition, in other words, I'm in this position now, but I like to get promoted, and ultimately I would like to be whatever, the boss. But with that as well, money. Money is an important element because guess what? We have to survive, pay the bills, and hopefully have some fun
Yes.
and plan for the future. So understanding your relationship with money, I like that lesson a lot because we all have a relationship with money, whether we like it or not, or whether we have money or not. But there is that relationship because it's something we need. We cannot live without money.
Right.
So that's an important lesson. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. A good point. I really like what you said earlier, one of your lessons, have a plan, not just an investment strategy. I think that's somewhere overall for me that I say, wow, that is something we can all adhere to have a plan, to make a plan, not just an investment strategy. I think that's important. But I appreciate obviously your wisdom, your experience that you are sharing with me, but with our global audience. And I want to thank you for joining us and for sharing your lessons for career advancement with our global audience. And in closing, I want to make a few remarks. You have been listening to our program, Lessons Learned to Advance Your Career. This episode is produced by Robert Hossery, and as always, we are supported by the Professional Development Forum. I also want to give my special thanks to our amazing team, Yi Weng, who manages our marketing and social media, and Cody Camo, our episode editor. Our guest today is Urban Adams, a seasoned financial advisor and a published author with over 25 years of financial industry experience, sharing his lessons learned for career advancement. And to our audience, I hope you enjoyed this special episode. Don't forget to subscribe so that you never miss a lesson that could impact your career and perhaps your life. Thank you for tuning in to 10 Lessons Learned and this special segment called Lessons Learned to Advance Your Career. Our goal, as always, is to make the world a little wiser, one lesson at a time. Thank you, and stay safe.